We are recording, and this is PAC 101. Again, it is intended for PAC exec, just to find out about where PACs fit in, again, I call it organized education, in BC education. And there's a lot of us, right? I mean, there's around 100 PACs in Vancouver, and there are many more PACs all around the province that represent their parents at the school level, and then there are a number of organizations that represent parents at the district level and at the provincial level. So let's go through that. And again, so what I said we'll go through is we go through the view of public education in BC, the representation at various levels. We'll talk about PACs. We'll talk about the most important relationship that PACs can have in their schools, which is with the administration. We'll talk a little bit about running PAC meetings. We will talk about elections and succession planning. And I might add that elections and succession planning are probably something that you should start pretty much as soon as you come on the PAC. It is something that we should all actively be thinking about so that we can grow those people that will take our roles in the years to come. So this very complicated slide tells us about all the organizations in education in BC, and at each level there's representation for parents, but also all the other stakeholders. So at the far left of this slide, you're going to see, of course, at your school at the local level, you've got the students. You've got the PACs, which represent the parents at that school. You've got the principals, the teachers, and you've got other employee groups such as education assistants, outside workers. And at each school, you've got those roles, and as you move up to the district level, at the Vancouver level, there's representation for all of those groups at the level up. So at the VSB level, there are the elected trustees that you're familiar with, and there are senior staff that DPAC often interacts with. But there are stakeholder, and DPAC is the stakeholder representing parents at the VSB level, and there are also other groups representing teachers and the principals and various administrative staff at the district level. So we parents are at the school level. We have representation through the PACs, and at the district level, when we speak to the VSB, we can speak through DPAC, and at the provincial level, all those organizations also have representation. So at the provincial level, parents are spoken for by BCCPAC. I would like to, we have a director from BCCPAC attending this evening, and I think it's worthwhile saying that they represent all parents in BC, and they put a lot of time in to do that. BCCPAC membership is something I would encourage your PAC to look into, because it is their source of funding, and it is and it helps them do work like put on sessions, educational sessions for parents in BC. And that's basically DPAC's role here as well, although our education sessions are like this one and more geared at a somewhat more local level. So again, there's a lot of organizations in education in BC. There's the school level, there's the district level, and there's provincial level. And you've got the parents, you've got the teachers, and you've got the principals and other workers at all represented at all levels by different organizations. It's quite it's quite a mix of names and acronyms. The work of I probably don't have this slide in the right place. This is also a very confusing slide. This is a confusing slide. It's a very complicated slide. This is the work of DPAC. DPAC represents parents, as I said, at the district level. And here's the organization, a snapshot of the organization at the district level. So there are the elected trustees, and those trustees have exactly one employee, the superintendent. And the superintendent is responsible for the rest of the staff in the organization. So the trustees really speak to staff through the superintendent, and the superintendent runs the place according to their wishes. And I would say that, I think to some extent, oh, okay, so whoever's drawing, I'm going to ask you not to draw. And I'm going to stop the annotation. Sorry about that. So one thing I would say is the work of DPAC and our executive is to, kind of provide feedback on the work of the VSB. The VSB is a fairly complicated organization, and that is doing a lot for our children, both at the school level and the district level. And it takes a lot of work to keep track of what they're doing. And I seem to be, oh, I know. Sorry, I seem to be having trouble advancing the slide. There we go. So I think I said this already in the in the fairly confusing first slide with all the organizations. As I said, BCC PAC is the organization that represents us at the provincial level. It's a registered nonprofit, and it represents parents of all the school children in BC. And they are the provincially mandated voice of parents in public schools, and so they speak for us at the provincial level when they have meetings with, for example, the Minister of Education. And just as a note for all of you, we are recording this session, as I mentioned, and I will also make these slides available. So feel free to just listen just listen, and all of this will be made available. And take notes if you want, but I mean, all of this will be made available for you afterwards. BCC PAC is governed by a volunteer board of 9 directors, which are elected by the membership. Those members are PACs, as I mentioned. So PACs for individual schools can be members. They have to pay for membership, and DPACs are also members. We also have to pay for membership. Membership fees are there, although I think those are still accurate. And so I've mentioned that at the district level, parents are represented by DPAC. So that's our organization here, or my organization. And also, like BCC PAC and PACs, we are constituted under the BC School Act. So each school district in BC can have only one DPAC, and most of the 60 districts have a DPAC, a functioning DPAC. It is, DPACs and PACs are volunteer organizations, and I think one of our jobs is to make sure that our PAC communities are strong, so that parents have a voice at each and every school and each and every district. District PACs, so DPACs, are required to have bylaws that govern our meetings, how we carry out business, and dissolution should that ever happen. And then the School Act gives DPACs the power to advise the school board on any matter relating to education in the school district. So that's at the district level, and that level of authority or to give advice is also at the school level by the PAC. So that's, for me, our ability to give advice to the district is, what DPAC does. But for all PACs, you have the ability to give advice about education, about anything relating to your kids' education. I will mention some caveats and some details, but you're allowed to give feedback to your school about what's going on in education at that school. Now, giving feedback and being a stakeholder is one thing. They don't always have to listen, but it is really, but you have the right to make your voice heard. And again, as I've said, Vancouver DPAC, we're a manifestation of the DPAC at the VSB, and our district number is 39, and our bylaws tell you about our 3 main purposes. We represent the parents, we communicate with the board, senior staff, and we work to promote parent leadership in PACs, and that's why we're here this evening. So just a little bit more about DPAC, about our organization. We are the representatives at district level. We are responsible for running our organization and making sure we do all the things that we're supposed to do, being a stakeholder at the district level, and we have two types of meetings. We have our executive meetings and our general meetings. So at our executive meetings, when DPAC executive take a motion, it's our 8 or 9, right now we have 8-member executive that vote on those motions. We also have representatives from each school that can speak for the school at our general meetings. So I mentioned two types of meetings, our executive meetings and our general meetings. Many of you here are here as the representative for your school, and in a general meeting, you would have the ability to vote on behalf of your school. So the way we do that is PACs can be represented by either a DPAC rep, and we have a general meeting coming up next week in which we will have a motion for PACs to vote on. So I will kind of talk a little bit more about that later. But the way that works is, so next week at our general meeting, I am not a PAC rep I am not a representative of either Trafalgar or Kitsilano, so I will have no voting rights at our meeting next week. Those voting rights will go to the DPAC reps or the chairs from those schools. Okay, so DPAC reps represent your PACs at our meetings. They bring information back, and by providing feedback to us at our meetings, they help us form policy, make motions, and again, DPAC reps or the chairs have voting power at our general meetings and at our elections. So when in the summer, when our execs, or in June when our execs are elected, they are elected by representatives from the schools. I'm just going to take a quick pause here, have a sip of water. Does anybody have any questions so far about the slides that I've shown? And you'll have to speak up. I cannot see the chat. Shervin?
Hi, sorry, thank you. Just a quick question.
Sure.
Is the DPAC position at the school level considered an executive role or a member at large?
So when you talk about the DPAC position at a given school, right? So we asked each school to send us a DPAC representative, and that is in many schools, in all the schools that I've seen, the DPAC representative is a member on the exec. But that is something that's dealt with in your own bylaws, right? So for each, and in all the bylaws I've seen, the DPAC in all the bylaws that I've seen for PACs, the DPAC representative is generally considered a member of the executive. Does that answer? Is that? But again,
Thank you. Yes, that does. Yes.
Yeah. But you absolutely need to go to your bylaws.
Yes, already did. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And I would say. And I would say the naming is a little bit weird because when we say DPAC reps, they are the representatives of the schools at our meetings. So yeah. Sorry, I heard another question.
Yeah, hi Gord, it's Nora. I'm just wondering about how, like you say that the DPAC rep represents the parents vis-a-vis the VSB. So how do you find out what exactly you're representing to the VSB? And also, I'd also so that's one question. And the other question is, yeah, I mean, the VSB asked for some feedback with the education plan. So how do we find out what the DPAC is, what representations the DPAC is making on behalf of the VSB students?
I think that's a great question. We have some. So I think many of the representations that we've made to the VSB over the last year or two, some of those have been formal, and some of those have been less formal and in line with our, kind of our stated guiding principles. So we have taken a number of positions, voted positions by our executive and actually at our executive meetings and in general meetings over the last 2 or 3 years. And if we have a voted position, so often it's a motion to say, the chair will write to the VSB and express concern with regards to this policy, or they will write in favor of a policy. So that is transparent. That is transparent through our meetings and what would happen in the minutes there. There are other positions that we would take that that's information that we would share, and concerns that we would raise, that our executive would raise at various VSB committee meetings, and generally those are things that we need to be careful about. We will generally say that some parents have concerns unless we have a firm position on that. But so some of those concerns that we bring forward at those committee meetings, you would find them in the committee meetings, or you could come to our meetings where we tend to have report outs on how we're interacting with the VSB and anything that our executive that are participating in those VSB committees have concerns about. Does that answer the? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it does kind of. I just want to understand it. And as for the committees, like who's on these committees, and in particular, I'm particularly interested in the anti-racism committee. Like I'm on the working group, but I have no idea who's on the committee. I'd like to know about that because it's important. So how do we find out like who are on these committees, what they're, what they're what they're thinking, right?
Sure. I keep moving a cat. So we have. So we do. We do have parents that are. It's the VSB has a number of committees, right? They have a number of standing committees, which we participate. I apologize. Sorry. The VSB has a number of standing committees which our exec participate in, and so those things that are stated by our exec will be in the VSB public records of those committee meetings, and again reported out in our when we get report outs in our meetings. But also we also have there are other working groups inside the VSB that are not formally broadcast to the outside, but we still would expect those parents to report out on what came to those meetings and ideally what they spoke about. So at our most recent executive meeting, we had a report out, for example, from Leona Brown, who is an Indigenous parent and participated on our behalf on the Indigenous Education Council, which is something that's being convened by the VSB.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess. Well, thank you for that. I'm just wondering, like, if the parents had something in particular they wanted to advance, or for the anti-racism committee to advance, then like who would we contact, or who are the people who are on it that we know who to communicate with?
Right, and so I would right now, we have a representative, for example, on the VSB's diversity committee, but I would encourage that the main communication come through the VSB, through the DPAC exec, so that we could funnel that through, and we would probably make the connection there if and as necessary. So I have 3 more hands up, so I'm just going to go on to them. I've got Maddie, and then Sky, and then Krista. So Maddie.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. One of your slides back there said that the School Act gives DPACs power to advise school board in any matter to education, and just clarifying that any matter to education would include things like thinking specifically of around bullying, or around holidays. I'm just thinking a bit more generally around education. I'm less concerned about English and math, and more about how diversity and community is being built. But I think that relates to education. But can you clarify?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I think that we would encourage our trustees in our district to understand that broadly, and we certainly understand it very broadly. So one example I would give is our executive had a voted position last year on the Student Liaison Officer program, which is not directly related to exactly what you learn in schools, but it's about that learning environment, and we most certainly provided feedback on that, and so that would be one example of how we're saying when we provide feedback on how education works in the district, that would be one of those things that we provided feedback on, and I would say and I would say that that's one thing that we've really taken as part of an important part of our mission. Sky?
Yeah, hi. So I'm just asking this question anonymously for someone else. I'm just wondering, the question is, if there's a DPAC rep and also the chair attending a meeting, in terms of the votes, who would get the vote if they both wanted to vote?
I don't think I think if I actually went to look at my bylaws, it would be entirely clear, and I would ask them to settle it, please. And I would ask them to settle it. I would probably, if you twisted my arm in a meeting, I would probably give it to the chair. But again, I don't think our bylaws are really clear. Which is probably, it may be an opportunity for us to look at and improve our bylaws. Krista?
Yeah, thanks, Gord. I just wanted to clarify Nora's comment before around an anti-racism committee. To my knowledge, there isn't an anti-racism committee at VSB. There's a diversity committee, right? And there also is no anti-racism committee at DPAC. There's a anti-racism working group, which may evolve into a committee, but as of right now, there is no committee. I could be wrong, but I don't think you addressed that component, because Nora sounded like she was concerned that there was work going on that she wasn't aware of, but I don't think that's the case.
No, you're right. Thanks for that clarification. Right now, the VSB has a diversity committee, and we have one parent representative on it. And the DPAC, our organization, has a number of committees that shadow the work of the VSB. For example, one of my colleagues chairs of the facilities committee, which follows the work of all the facility stuff in the VSB, and it's enormous. We are looking to start an anti-racism committee because we think that the VSB is doing a lot of work on anti-racism, so we're looking at starting our own committee that is devoted to anti-racism, but I don't have a committee with the terms of reference at this point. I do have parents that we sometimes tap on the shoulder that are Black and Indigenous, that we say we often will look at their viewpoint, but I really do need a more robust committee to kind of look at look at it a little bit more broadly. And again, it's something that is on our list because we want to follow the work of the VSB. So thank you for that question, and I hope that answers the question. Okay, I'm gonna move on in the presentation. So I probably spoke out of order without looking at my slide deck. So I talked about our meetings, and I said we have executive meetings, we have general meetings, we have ad hoc educational meetings, kind of like this one, and we have a year-end meeting where we do elections, and we do any year-end reports. So that's mostly about us, and next, and again, I will probably say it again, next week we do have a general meeting where we know that a PAC will be bringing forward a motion for other PACs to consider. So as a stakeholder of the VSB, through the power granted in the School Act, the Vancouver DPAC is considered a stakeholder of the Vancouver School Board. I don't think that that's necessarily the same standing that's given to every DPAC across the province. So we have a reasonable relationship with our district. I do actually commend our district for it, because I've definitely heard other districts, parents have difficulty accessing their districts for information and to do their work. But being a stakeholder is both it's a response. I view it first as a big, we get a voice, but we have a lot of responsibility, which is why I kind of referred to the committee meeting, the formal committee meetings, and all the working groups that we do end up attending, or asking parent volunteers to attend on behalf of DPAC. So you can see from the slide here that responsibility means we show up to the VSB standing committee meetings. We have parents on many of the groups, and we participate in workshops and promote and we promote, for example, their recent survey. That's something that we would have promoted. One of the, for our organization, one of our most important relationships is with the senior management, because it helps us understand what's going on at the district, and where things are going to go. And I would also say that we don't generally advocate for specific schools, but having good relationships with the senior management helps us get schools in touch with the right helps us get schools in touch with the right people to make sure that things keep moving forward when schools have questions themselves. Okay, so this is the part that I think is that's enough about us. This is a little bit more relevant to PACs. So PACs at the school level are also created by the BC School Act, which gives you the responsibility of electing officers, creating bylaws to govern your meetings, how business occurs at those meetings, and how to wrap up your PAC if if you don't have enough parents to represent the school, or if the school, for example, has closed. So, for example, although the school has not yet officially closed, there's been Carleton Elementary School has not had a functioning PAC for a while, or has not been a functioning school for some time due to a fire, and has not yet been rebuilt. So I do believe that the PAC there has recently officially dissolved. So in return for those responsibilities, the School Act gives PACs the power to advise the school admin and staff and the school board on any matter relating to education at that school. I would say that generally PACs do absolutely speak to their administration, and that's probably one of the most important relationships. That is one of the most important relationships, but PACs do absolutely have the power to advise the school board as well, and that is something that we will try to enable and get PACs in the right place to do that if they need to. And if you just one moment, I'm just going to turn on live transcript. I apologize. Let's see. My apologies for not enabling that earlier. Thank you for asking. One of the things that we've been doing at some of our meetings is we have been enabling the live transcription feature in Zoom, and I apologize for not doing that earlier in this meeting. It is a string of words that is created automatically at the bottom of the page for those of you that need help with it, it's especially helpful for those that sometimes have difficulty following along with, let's say I'm speaking too fast. It's nicer to see the words transcribed as best they can. So it's something that we're doing for accessibility reasons. So more about PACs. So that's what you're here for, your PACs. A PAC is the official collective voice of parents at a particular school, as created by the School Act, and you should provide input to the school through a direct channel to the administration. Your relationship with your administration is the most important relationship that you can have. You can learn about what's going on at the school, the various activities in and outside of the school that are being put on, and you are advocates for students in the school community. There is only one PAC per school, and I did say that PACs are able to advise the administration and districts on any matter, but PACs are not a place to discuss the actions of individual teachers or individual students, for that matter. That is right out. So we can advise about how education is conducted at the school, but personnel issues are something that we don't talk about. I think this slide just reiterates what I said. The relationship that you have with your administration is the most important one. Having a principal ready to cooperate with the PAC to do its work is really, really important, and having a good relationship is crucial. And I would encourage you to communicate regularly with your administrators. They really, really need to be involved, and as far as getting you connected inside the school, making sure your meetings happen, and for anything that you might wish to do around the school, administrator support is often needed and required. So just some best practices for working with those administrators. Keep them informed. Keep talking to them. Make sure they know what you're planning. Try to minimize the number of surprises by keeping them in the loop. And do be a voice for parents in the community, and try to bring a common voice to the administrators if you can. I mean, you're the voice of the parents, and the administrator, wants to be able to speak with somebody they have an existing relationship with, and it's easier to speak with, the PAC leadership rather than speaking to 40 separate parents. Again, there will be occasions where that's absolutely necessary. The administrator needs to talk to a lot of different people, but again, it probably helps them a lot if you can be that voice of the parents for them. And again, that's a lot of responsibility for PACs, because that means you have to listen to the voices of the parents in your community. You have to take into consideration those that are, most vulnerable, most impacted, and you have to be able to represent all the voices. To the administration, and that is absolutely a challenge, and I can tell you that's been a challenge over the last few years for us at the VSB, certainly. We're just about to talk about bylaws. I could probably go into that, but I'm also just going to stop for water. And does anybody have any questions about what we've covered so far about kind of how our DPAC meetings are structured, and then what we've heard so far about PACs?
Well, Gord, I just wanted to sort of maybe mention that our PAC at Trafalgar, it has an, like I said earlier, it has an inclusion, diversity, equity, and acceptance committee, which actually concentrates on trying to be inclusive. And I think that it's necessary because oftentimes if you're a person who might be a racialized person or a woman, and you have a different point of view than perhaps other people, you might end up getting sidelined in some way. And it's actually good for everybody, no matter who they are, to have some support and people who might be understanding of their position. And therefore, I think it's been really great at our PAC that we now have an ideas committee to be able to sort of deal with those parents who think they're not being listened to, and perhaps mediate with the executive if necessary. Because if you're if you're sort of concentrating all the community power in the sort of in the hands of the executive, then it's a lot of power, and it has to be sort of counterbalanced in some way in order for everybody to feel welcome to participate and for voices really to be heard.
Yeah, it's and you know, hearing all the voices of the parents in your community is definitely hard work and a challenge. And it's good that you have a committee that's kind of devoted to making sure those voices are heard and inclusion. I do know that a number of schools are creating, a number of PACs have created committees devoted to inclusion, and I think that is, not only do I think that's a great thing, I mean, I think it's, you know, an important statement on what we're starting to value as a society and as a community. One thing I would note, though, you know, I know that Trafalgar is lucky to have a strong PAC community with many parents that are interested and involved, and I know that there are definitely other PACs where the community of parents is smaller. And so again, you know, we're not saying, by no means am I saying, oh, you're failing as a PAC if you don't have a community devoted to inclusion, right? I mean, you might not have the volunteers to make that happen, right? But you know, I think it's really important that we all do keep inclusion in mind in our decision making process, whether or not you do have a separate committee devoted to it.
Sure, it's actually part of the BCC PAC leadership manual. There's one of the sections is devoted to creating inclusive PACs. So when I have time, I'll pop it into the chat box.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I'm going to move on to, unless there are any other questions. With that, I'm going to move on to PAC bylaws. So PAC bylaws are really important, but really dry. But I will say they are really important. So the School Act requires every PAC to have a bylaws that specify at a minimum how meetings are run, how the business of the PAC is conducted, including you know, who you elect to your executive, how dissolution is to be handled, and how you appoint DPAC reps. If you do not have bylaws, we can get you started. We have a collection of bylaws from schools that have we have a collection of bylaws from schools that have contributed theirs. We can also point you to the BCC PAC template, which is a little bit out of date for bylaws. It is really important to have a functioning set of bylaws, and it's not like and bylaws evolve, right? Bylaws evolve depending on your particular school and your particular circumstance. So I will tell you that, you know, for example, DPAC's bylaws have evolved through a particular set of circumstances to address issues that have come up and needed to be, you know, discussed, and had a way to deal with those. Bylaws could be considered, although there are a lot of work to open up, they should be considered a living document that you might need to maintain from time to time. And you know, if you are part of your PAC exec, find out what your bylaws are. Make sure you have bylaws. The most concerning thing for me is when a PAC comes to me and says, "Well, what should we do here?" And my response is, "Well, look at your bylaws." It's like, we don't have bylaws, or we don't know where those are. It's like, okay, well then that's, you know, that's a, you know, people are looking for a framework in which to, you know, run their organizations, and sometimes you don't realize you need that framework until you run into a problem, right? And so it's great to have bylaws ready ahead of that problem that have been agreed on. And again, there are templates available. If there's nothing, I mean, I can't stress it enough. Know where your bylaws are, know what they look like, and if they're really old, do give them a think and see whether they meet the needs of your organization. So bylaws, of course, are going to cover how meetings, how officers are elected, whether you have co-chairs, vice chairs. They will cover a whole bunch of different things that some of them will be particular to your school, but and they will cover other things like they may cover treasurer things, right? Treasurer responsibilities, and there may be some associated procedures that are associated or referenced in your bylaws that are really important to, for example, for how you handle money, right? So again, I can't say it enough. Know where your bylaws are. Know what your bylaws, and you should treat them as a living document. They don't all have to be the same, but you do absolutely have to have them. Usually your bylaws will talk about who your executive officers are. So most PACs will have a number of officers, and usually you require a minimum of chair, treasurer, and secretary to function as a PAC. And I would say that's absolutely a minimum, because I think it's absolutely a best practice, and this will come up in Treasurer 101. It's absolutely a best practice. In fact, it should almost be a requirement, but that checks that are signed should be signed by two people, right? And so if somebody is spending money on behalf of the school, or one of the exec is spending money on behalf of the school, you need two other officers to sign for that person. So that's why we normally say that you usually need those minimum 3 roles to function. Again, these roles may be shared if your bylaws allow it. So I know that in the time that I was at Trafalgar, I was a co-chair, and the bylaws will tell you what roles are allowed and their terms. Your bylaws may define other roles like past chair and so on. One thing I would say about co-chair roles or shared roles is they can be a little bit confusing, especially when you talk about the election piece. So that part can be really confusing, but they are really, really important. I really encourage you. I mean, I don't want everybody to go off and open up their bylaws just because Gord said something, but I do really think that having 2 people in a position or sharing a position, it first makes the work easier. It just lightens the load. It gives people a way to participate, and it also makes transitions easier. So sometimes you'll have one of the 2 co-chairs or co-treasurers leave, you still have somebody on who can teach the next person the ropes. So again, I'm not saying that everybody has to have co-chairs, co-treasurers, or that sort of thing, but it is a really nice way to have some success, to do a little bit of succession planning built in. And again, it gives more people an opportunity to participate in the PAC executive. Your bylaws will stipulate when you do your elections. So they'll determine the rules regarding the elections of your officers and your at-larges. Some PACs have their elections set kind of at the end of the school year, and others have them set at the start of the school year. All of that is basically up to your bylaws. One thing I would say about PAC elections is it is best practice to know what the election date is well ahead of time. Sometimes they'll be part of the AGM, and provide parents with as much notice as you can about what's happening and at those elections. Election results should be published in approved minutes and posted somewhere that your parents can find them. PACs really need to be transparent to their parents. When we say they need to be posted online, I mean, really, I don't need to see your minutes myself, but it's important that they're readily available for all the parents at your school, right? And often that's just simply in an online area. PAC succession planning. I kind of talked about this a little bit when we talked about chairs and co-chairs. PACs are run by parent volunteers. Parent volunteers get tired, their kids grow up. It's very busy. Succession planning is really, really important. It is really important to pass along all those things that you do, all those things that you do to another set of parents pretty much as soon as you can, right? And you want to make that information as readily available so people can pick it up as quickly as possible. So some things, if there's a recurring PAC event like a spring fair or hot dog days, you know, it should be somebody, there should be some documentation that somebody writes, maybe even some checklists to kind of pass the information on about that event, but also with regards to the, you know, the things that the PAC has done, and also especially with regards to the at-large and officer roles. It's really important to have lots of people, as really, I mean, I like things written down. If it's passed on through word of mouth, that's okay. But sometimes sometimes having something written at least gives the next person a framework to start, and you know, they'll look at it and they can ask the last person who did the job some questions before they move on. Succession planning is really important. I cannot say this enough. I mean, really, you should start thinking about, and I'm going to say this out loud, you should start thinking about succession planning almost, you know, as soon as you get into your role. Think about who else. I know that you're just getting, some of you may just be getting your feet, but think about who else might do this in the future, right? Because the thing you don't want is, you don't want to be stuck in a place where nobody else knows the role, and it's like, oh, it's Gord again. It's Gord again because he knows the role. It's like, nope, that doesn't work. So, you know, you've got to look for somebody else who will do that job for you. You know, in the future. You're enjoying it now, fantastic. I saw a hand up, and I'm going to take a sip of water. So, okay. So if nobody has any questions, I will try to keep going. So this is just a slide about how you run your meetings, and I think that I know that I think that one thing that we should talk about meetings is, you know, meetings are to kind of share information, but also help the group get to sometimes it's to help the group get to a decision. And many PAC bylaws refer to Robert's rules, or a stripped down version of Robert's rules, Bob's rules. And I think those are good things, but we shouldn't necessarily let those rules get in the way of making sure that everybody has their voice heard. Those rules are there to provide a framework, and there are other ways to get to the same result. I would mention that we did actually have a parliamentarian speak to us and present to a number of PACs early this year, and it is something that we have recorded and that we can make available for PACs on request. We were asked, because this person makes their living from speaking, or part of their living from speaking engagements, we do not have it posted publicly, but we are allowed to share it with PACs, individuals, privately. So again, that was just kind of a session on Robert's rules, and I think he titled it Robert's Rules to help with effective meetings. And again, you know, some of the things that we do at our meetings, at our DPAC meetings, are based on, you know, his advice, which is, it's just a framework to make sure that everybody is heard and to make decisions. So some of that, what I just said, is PAC meetings, some of the rules around that, some of the suggestions around that, but again, whatever works for your PAC. Have an agenda, have a set time so that meetings don't go, so make sure that, you know, have a set time that you know that things will end, so that people, you know, can get back to their babysitters, for example. Have a general, just one moment, please. You know, have a general set of, you know, way that you conduct business. Often that's Robert's rules, and ensure that all parents have a voice. Sometimes you're not going to have a time to discuss everything at every meeting, and some conversations aren't, you know, you're not going to be able to start and finish them at the meeting, and so you take those offline as necessary. Do respect everybody's time. Everybody's there for their everybody's there to, you know, try to make their school community better. And chairs, you have a special responsibility just to make sure that everybody does have a chance to speak. I'm looking through. Okay. Just a little bit more on your meetings. Your bylaws may actually specify how meetings are to be run. They may specify that you have to have the agenda up, a certain number of days in advance for anything to be discussed. I've not normally seen that, but I mean, it is possible. Other things that might be part of either your bylaws or common practice could be like a welcome, a land acknowledgement, and a move to approve the agenda, approve previous minutes, approve reports. Again, I think that some of the things, like for example, approving the meeting agenda and the previous minutes, that's often, it's good that people look at, are aware of what's on the agenda and what was on the previous and what happened and review the previous minutes. Those are good things, but I don't think that you should let those interrupt the flow of the meeting if there's general consensus that to move on. Again, that is something that was suggested by the parliamentarian that came in to speak to us, and I do suggest that. I mean, again, if you're looking at it, some gentle suggestions on how to run meetings if you're the chair. That was a good session. Often at PAC meetings, we do have, it's often the case that it was probably mentioned in an earlier slide that the administrator is usually invited to all PAC meetings. In fact, and they are a non-voting member of the executive. Most PAC meetings that I see do have the administrators there just to let us know about what's going on around the school. At our DPAC meetings, we have similar updates from senior staff and often a trustee. I did talk about, be as formal as you need to be. And so you might have heard me say, well, with things like approving the agenda or approving things like, past meeting minutes, it's something that you can do as long as you can do fairly quickly as long as everybody agrees. There are times where it is more important to have a formal vote, to have good minutes. One of those times would be things like any decisions that you make with regards to spending and the budget. So if you are authorizing the expenditure of something for a program that comes out of PAC funds, as absolutely something that you should have that you should have a motion, you should have ideally you should have a seconder, and you should have that in the minutes. Minutes don't have to be a totally detailed breakdown of everything that everybody said. So if you're a secretary, I mean, again, it is a personal style as to how much detail that you wish to convey. I know that some secretaries like to say, well, I'd like to, like give you a flavor of the meeting, which is fine. But also the most important thing is, do you have motions? Do you have amendments to the motion? And do you have a vote? And did the vote pass? So those, I mean, again, as much as I am casual for some parts of meetings, of formal meetings, there are other parts that it is important for you to be fairly careful on. Other places it's important for you to be fairly careful are your elections, because you want to make sure those are done by the rules. And also anything to do with signing authority, you probably want to make sure those are done by a formal vote. So for example, when we are changing signing authorities for our bank accounts, we're very careful with that. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Sorry, went backwards there. In the last year and a half, we have been doing a lot of meetings online. And that is both a good and bad thing. I don't know. Certainly we have found that we've had more consistent, stronger attendance with online meetings, and even with Zoom fatigue, I think it is nice for us to be able to participate in meetings, listen in on what's going on. And it's not important that everybody is on camera every minute. We all know that we have kids that are running around the house. And so I certainly have found it to be a boon to be able to participate in some of the meetings kind of quietly and just listening in on what's going on at the PAC, and turn on my mic as required. So Zoom meetings have been not bad. As I said, they're more accessible to those with childcare needs, and one of the concerns at the start of the pandemic was that the technology requirement would be fairly high and it would exclude some parents. I would say that most schools are not reporting that as an issue. The technology the bar to entering a Zoom meeting is fairly low, and it's been okay. It's not that we don't. It's not that we want to discourage. Well, I'm not ready for that many in-person meetings yet, but we have started attending some of them. I would also mention that DPAC has this year from the VSB a small number of Zoom licenses that we share as an executive, which we can use to help you host your meetings. So if you are, and this is especially important, many elementary schools, your meetings are going to be smaller. There may be a parent that has access to a license. You may have a parent on your exec that has access to a license that allows you to easily host meetings. But if you don't, feel free to reach out to us. All the schools have a DPAC exec paired to them, a liaison executive, and we can help you schedule and open meetings if you need help with Zoom. This is especially important actually for the secondary schools. So if you're from a secondary school, the Zoom that you will often have more attendees, and we've hosted some meetings over the last year that have had over 150 to 200 people in them for some various issues. Yes, I see Anita's clapping, and I mean it's great to see that kind of parent engagement, and the licenses to open a meeting for 300 people are a little bit harder to come by. So we are absolutely happy to connect with schools, especially to help you open your meetings, to help you with Zoom for those meetings, because that is what they were given to us by the VSB for. That's something we're continuing this year. Not sure what's going to happen with it next year. We will see, but they did renew it for this year, and so that's a good thing. One other thing I would say about that's been good about PAC meetings online is there is the chat function. So it's a bit of a good and bad. It is very helpful. Sometimes parents will exchange links for one another in the chat, or you'll be able to provide somebody like a more direct link, and people will be able to check out that resource. It can be a little bit distracting as well. I do tell people myself that most of the time I cannot see that. I can only very rarely see the chat, and so it is a bit of it can be good and bad. And for each chair and each PAC, I would just make some decisions on your own as to how you're going to treat the chat. I would say it allows sharing of information, but it can be really, really distracting. PAC meetings held by Zoom. There are challenges. I think I mentioned bullet 5 already. The chat can be a little bit distracting. Another thing about Zoom meetings is often bylaws don't do a really good job of accommodating some of the things that you might need to do. So for example, if you have an election that requires secret ballots, Zoom meetings aren't necessarily super good for them or super easy to do. Also, when you don't show up in person at meetings, there's a lot less of that chatter, which helps your fellow parents better. And so those have been some of the challenges that have obviously turned up as we've turned to our screens in the last 18 months. So I mean, I think many of us are familiar with those both those positives and challenges from our time over the last 18 months. And I could give suggestions, or people could pop their hands up and tell us how their meetings have been going for the last 18 months, what you found worked, what didn't work. So why don't I just pause there and say, how am I doing? Am I covering some of those things that you wanted to hear about? Were there other things that you wanted to hear about from me? I do have some more slides about PACs, but how am I doing so far? Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay. Please, if you, I mean, again, I'm here I'm here to help. I'm here to give information, and I'm happy to, you know, like listen. I'm sure other people would say, if you've got something innovative that you've been doing that you wanted to share, absolutely want to hear from anybody or everybody. Again, I think my goal here really is to help you guys make your PACs stronger organizations, to engage with your parents so they can engage with their schools. And I'm going to probably put in a you know a promo for my next general meeting for various reasons in the next few slides. So you'll probably hear more about like why I think PACs are so important. I've got two hands up. Roya?
Hi, yes, thank you very much. Great information. I just wanted to ask how long how long more we are going to be online?
That's a great question. Here, give me half a second. Let's see. Let me see how many more slides. Let me see how many more slides I have in my deck. Okay. So I've been talking for about an hour, and I've gone through about 30 slides. I've got about about nine to 10 slides left, I think, of that have any significant content.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, probably 20 minutes, but you know, again, we're recording, or I'm pretty sure I hit the recording button at the start of this. So if you need to step out, you know, please. But yeah, and I'm going to expand that to screen view again. Maddie?
Hi. Just for my understanding, the exec, when we say a PAC exec, so the exec are people that have been voted into specific roles, and those specific roles have been pre-identified and are located in a bylaw, I think. And those people have their own special meetings and talk about things. If in the middle of the school year, say for example in December or January, there would be a proposal to shift something in the exec or in the PAC, but the AGM isn't for like another 6 months. What happens with something like that?
So yeah, so normally the exec does absolutely refer to specific positions, and they should be mentioned specifically in the bylaws. So there's the officers, and there's the officers are a subset of the executive, and the executive will be the full set of everybody mentioned in your bylaws. So sometime one of the earlier slides reference officers being usually including the chair, treasurer, and secretary, those and as minimum to function. The DPAC representative may be an exec depending on your bylaws, and there may be other at-large positions or past president or past chair positions that may also have voting rights on the exec. Your bylaws should deal with, I mean, and this is one of those things that it's like, well, it's you hope that your bylaws have something to deal with it. So for example, bylaws should have something to deal with either let's say somebody stepped down, they've left the school. Ideally, it would be nice if the bylaws had something to deal with replacing that person. So for example, let's say your treasurer had to leave, you know, something's come up, they've left the school. That's a very important role. You're going to need to fill that, and you will hope that your bylaws can guide you on filling that very important role. But if not, then you know it's probably important for you to you know, if you don't have bylaws for it, you're going to have to do it as transparently as you can to make sure that you have the confidence of your parent community. That's all I could say. I mean, you should err on the side of being more transparent and giving more notice. I don't know. I know that's not a total exact piece of advice, but I mean, I think the example of having a treasurer or other officer leave in the middle of a year is, you know, exactly something that not all bylaws will deal with. And if they do, it's fantastic. But if not, you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with it that makes everybody happy at the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm thinking around diversity and inclusion, and I know you mentioned that some PACs have more parent participation, and the PAC that I'm on has a very small PAC exec, and our meetings draw in a number of parents, but our PAC exec is all white, and I would love to be able to make it a safer space, a fuller space, have more voices there. But now, because we've already had our AGM and the main key roles have been voted in, that means we're sort of done for this year. But I would love to be able to try to drum up more involvement and support. But what role would I invite people into if the PAC's done for the voting year?
So again, I would start if there are other roles on the executive that are open. So sometimes PACs will have at-large roles, and if there's flexibility in the bylaws, that's one way to include those people in the discussions. I will tell you that one example that I would give about our organization DPAC, and one of the things that we've tried to do recently with starting up a number of committees that are specifically we're trying to make room for parents that are interested in one thing but not interested in the rest of the DPAC apparatus or meetings. We're trying to give them a venue to kind of provide their feedback. So we mentioned earlier that we are working on getting a proper anti-racism committee with the terms of reference and so on and so forth. And the idea there is, we know that there are parents that do not have the bandwidth to or the desire to deal with the VSB on the committees that we sit on, but they certainly have opinions that they want to share with us. And so by creating a kind of committee for us to explicitly, for them, can be a safe space, and for us to explicitly hear that feedback, that is something that again we're looking to do. We're not there yet, but again, so I think there's so kind of to go back, I think there's a few ways that you could involve them, but I would try to start with looking at the bylaws. And if you think it's really, really important to do something that isn't covered by the bylaws, again, I use the example of somebody leaving, but you could take it in any way you wished. I would just be careful, make it as transparent as possible. Absolutely as transparent as possible, so everybody leaves there with, yeah, we did the right thing.
Well, Gord, I was just I was thinking that, like, at our particular PAC, anybody who doesn't have a role, they can always join the ideas committee, and then the ideas committee generates ideas for inclusion. And one of the ideas we had for inclusion this year was to have like a walking group and new parents have been joining our walking group. And the thing is that out of the walking group, we've been able to recruit people for a PAC, right? So maybe you can get a social committee going, or just like anybody who wants to be involved and who's interested in actually meeting other people in the community. Because I think because of COVID, parents haven't really had the chance, especially new parents and nurses, haven't really had the chance to. So I myself, I think it's great.
Sorry, your audio is, I heard the first part, your audio cut out for the last little bit, but I think that's but I think that's well taken, right? I mean, PACs, I'm sure I'm going to say it in a slide coming up, but I'm going to reemphasize it now. I know a lot of PACs think about fundraising, but that is not one of, I think the most important contribution a PAC can make to its school is being the voice of the parents, and building community, right? And so what Nora, and through those seeds of community building, you will have, you can build that participation at other levels, right? And so I can tell you that I came to my work with the PAC because there was a volunteer position open helping to manage a website for our hot lunch, and I have an opportunity, give people a job. If people, I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. Again, there's building community through social, or giving people volunteer opportunities, because people generally, they want to help, they want to give what they can where they can. So I think there's a lot of, a lot of ways to get people involved. If you really need somebody to sit, on the executive, then look to the bylaws first. And if the bylaws are silent, then be careful, but do what you can as transparently as you can. So just moving on, some best practices for PAC meetings online. We talked about some of the good and some of the bad. Best practices: interpret your bylaws so you can meet by video. I think that at this point, 18 months in, I think that we've all done that. But this was a really important thing I had to say last year, and it still continues to be important at this time. And change your bylaws if they absolutely prohibit video. It's frankly, we functioned this long. I don't see why. I would have difficulty understanding an argument to be made why participation via video conference is explicitly prohibited. You'll need to, if you're hosting the meeting, you should be familiar with the tools that you're using to host the meeting. Sorry, I'm just going to mute. Okay, sorry. If you're hosting the meeting, you should know the tools that you're using to host the meeting, so that you can help people along with them. Require registration if necessary. I know that at the start of the pandemic, people were having a lot of fun by dropping into random Zoom meetings, and that's not a good thing. So at the start of the pandemic, it was generally a suggestion that people should require registration to all meetings, so that you have some chance of knowing who's showing up and what their email address might be. Might still be a best practice, but many meetings open without that. I would say it's up to you, but just do be aware of the possibility of disruption if you have an open meeting. Some more thoughts for PACs and how to organize your PACs. Some technical bits. I mean, PACs are the voice of the parents, which means that you need to communicate back to the parents what you guys have talked about, and you serve as a resource to the parents, right? And so some things you might wish to consider, and again, this is not for every organization, but you might consider registering a domain name, so that you have a website that you can point, a website and email, consistent website and email that you can point your parents to. You can put your agendas there, you can put your minutes there, you can put your bylaws there. Another thing I would say really, really strongly, whether or not you have registered a domain name, is for your PAC work, always use an email address that you will hand down to the next person doing the role. So ideally, you should not be using Gord. You should not be using gordlau@gmail.com for your chair work. Ideally, it would be an email address, a Gmail account or other account that is specific to your work as chair. This will help avoid you receiving unwanted email in the future. Also, it will help people that follow after you understand. They will be able to go through your emails and understand what you were talking about. You will have some history of what you've discussed with either your other executive or your administration. So it is really, again, for your PACs, and especially for your officer roles, I really do encourage that it is some sort of account that is handed down as people go through that role. If it's useful for your PAC, you can create social media accounts. Again, this is just to help communicate with your parents. I think the job really is to meet your parents where they are at and communicate with them in the way that they will hear your message. So I know that a number of schools have used Facebook pages or Facebook groups to keep in touch with their parents, and that's fine. They can be private, semi-private, or a little bit more open. I know that some schools have created Twitter accounts, but again, the Twitter account is interesting, but you should ask yourself when you're trying to decide whether or not to put time into it, is it helping you communicate and reach parents in your school communities? And one question, and I think that the question at the bottom of this slide is important, like how do your parent, when somebody shows up at your school, how do they know what the community of parents is, right? How will they hear about it first? And that's something that you should really spend some time thinking about. Claude?
This is kind of a more general question to the attendees. Have other PACs explored other avenues of communication like Slack and Discord? And if so, how have they gone? How are they going?
Well, I mean, I've been talking for a while. I'll open it up there for people that wish to answer that question from Claude. Other Discord, Slack?
We do use Slack, Claude. And something that our treasurer and I just actually exchanged a message about is to Gord's point about the dissemination of information post or after you have a new set of people. How do you do that via Slack when everyone uses their personal email addresses? So that's, I guess, would be one area to think about. Slack's been great because it offers translation options so that we can be inclusive to our non-primary English speakers. And that was a big reason why we decided to use it.
I would say that I'm going to be mentioning a little bit later on a couple of groups, a couple of PAC groups and tools that PACs are using to connect with one another in the Lower Mainland area, and those may be useful. Again, I think it really depends on meeting your parent community where they are and what they're familiar with. But it is that piece about disseminating that information about like your minutes and your agenda, that is fairly important, because that needs to be broad.
Yeah, our PAC talked about it briefly at the sort of start of COVID last year, September. And it didn't really go forward because the main concern was just here's yet another avenue of communication. We've got a blog, we've got email, we've got all these ways that we reach parents. So this would be like yet another thing that people need to monitor. And the other concern was just the perceived additional overhead. So, somebody would have to kind of maintain Slack and set up channels and potentially look into moderation. So it didn't really move forward. So I was kind of curious, if other PACs had actually done this. And again, this is like not just for the PAC exec, but for the entire PAC community.
Yeah, I would say that I can tell you that DPAC uses Slack internally as a place to have our conversations, but our outward facing is, through emails, it's through newsletters, it's through social media, it's through our social media pages and Twitter. So we participate in some Slack channels, but I wouldn't consider it a primary for much of our communication. And that's our experience.
Thank you.
One thing I will say about the idea of registering a domain name, domain names are interesting. They're great. It's nice to have a domain name like that is easy to use for communicating your email addresses and your website with parents. But I cannot say this enough. Do not assume that parent that you need to be careful about making those choices, and it depends on the community, because you do not want to be in a situation where you lose access to something because some parent has that parent is no longer available to support it. And I would go back actually just one slide. The thing about having a general email address for the PAC, like something that is inheritable, I would like to just go back on that. I mean, we've lost there. I know that some PACs have lost more, that have lost, some like some of the PACs that have had, their chairs or other people use their personal email addresses as the main avenues of communication. When those people have left under whatever terms they've left, sometimes that leaves a hole in the PAC's in the PAC's memory, right? Especially if it's a smaller PAC and a lot of communication has gone through that person's personal email, that's no longer available to you. And so I think it's really, really important to suggest that for the longevity of your PAC, that all those accounts should be something that you knowingly and willingly transfer to the next person in line. And yeah, that's important. But back to this slide, which is talking about the technical piece, I would say with regards to the technical piece, do not always assume that you will have the same technical parents around in future years. And so I can give you an example that is relevant to our attendees from Trafalgar. At one point, the Trafalgar website was built, trafalgarpac.ca website was built by a parent, and for a while there, it's like, oh, you still own, this person still owns the domain name registration, it's still being paid by you, and you have not been at the school for 2 years. How do we deal with that? How do we communicate with you? How do we make sure that comes over? So that is, that's an experience that I have had as a chair, and I think it's really relevant to those of you. Just as a side note for Trafalgar, I know that it's all been inherited properly. Should have all been inherited properly at this point, but I mean, it's a real concern. So if you do something with a personalized domain or something, make sure that you have ways of supporting that should some of those parents leave. Again, it's making sure that you have lots of parents, some transfer of information to the next person. Okay, so I think I've mentioned these 2 points multiple times in what I've said tonight, so I'm just going to keep moving on. No personal email addresses. I've talked about what I consider the most important role of PACs to be. I think I've put that as an aside, but this probably states in a few slides those things again. We build community. I think PACs are really important, especially in the last 18 months. PACs have such an important role in building and maintaining the school community, especially when it's been so much more difficult to see each other on the playgrounds and to see each other on the playgrounds, at pickup, at drop off, at various school activities. Without those, it's been a little bit weird. And so PACs have a really important role to play, especially in keeping community alive and building that up when we are able to gather more fully. So PAC's responsibility: build community, be inclusive, recognize the diversity in your school communities. Some suggestions: if feasible, publish the information about your PAC in more than one language. This is a tricky one because that is something that ultimately wants to be volunteer supported, because it's not, there's no service that we can just turn to, but I think it's a great help. It just does mean a little bit more planning for some of your communications. Make sure that make sure that your parents, your administration promote the PAC when talking to parents. It helps to have parents know about the parent organization, and try to communicate where your parents are, just using language that everybody can understand. Some other ideas for building community and ideas to reach new parents. I mentioned the administration, enlisting the administration and making sure they talked about the PAC to parents. But if you can swing it, just have the PAC, maybe if they're, I know this is an idea for the time when we can actually go into schools, but I mean the idea of having a board for the PAC where with your mission statement and maybe some of your upcoming meetings, when we can go back to schools, that might be a nice thing. And again, maybe circulate materials, maybe have your administration help you circulate materials that talk about the PAC, and especially the first few PAC meetings, inviting people to join. And I know that many of you have probably already had your first meetings, but again, when parents make it to their first PAC meeting, they want to feel welcomed. They want to feel that, participation from everybody is important, and they should feel curious about what else is out there. So not just what's going on at the school level, but, what else is going on out there that that's relevant to my child and their education. And so I think those are just important things to think about as people come to the meeting, especially for the first time. And again, for anybody who this is their first meeting, I hope I've done those things. Again, welcome. And I know I've been talking for a bit. This slide is with regard to promotion. And again, these are all ideas, whatever works for your community, but it takes work to promote the PAC to the community. So please take every opportunity you can to promote both your meetings, but also your social events. And make it give them as many places as they can to find out about you. One thing that some PACs find really successful is at their meetings, they will also often have an educational component. So that can sometimes draw parents in, whether it's about online safety or whether it's about, applications for university. Again, it depends. What presentations you bring to your school community will depend on what your school community is interested in doing. Also, I would say that in these days, as many of those presentations are online, you may find it effective to team up with other schools to bring in presenters that will be relevant, and also to make connections to other local PACs. There are a number of free resources that do presentations. So BCTF has a number of guest speakers that can come to events, but they do need to be contacted ahead of time. The BCTF has quite a number of presentations with regards to social media, equity, advocating for your child. Oops, sorry. Okay, I don't know what's going on. And the VSB also has a number of staff who can speak on topics such as I think SACY stands for Supporting and Connecting Youth, but it often talks about drug and alcohol use and challenges facing adolescent children. And they will have other workshops as well. Other ideas, you could have teachers can also do presentations that are relevant to the school or VSB staff. I think I'm fairly close to the end of my presentation. I think I've said everything that I needed to say. One thing I would say is it's great to see everybody here tonight from your own individual PACs, and I think it's really important to know that you're in this, we're all in this together. We're all pushing in the same way, in the same direction. There are other schools that are doing the same things and trying to, get to the same place with their parents. Absolutely connect with other PACs. So DPAC, we end up talking to a lot of schools. So there may be cases where there may be lots of places where we don't have the answer, but we will know a school that has done something that might be of interest, might be relevant to your parents. So we do our job of trying to connect PACs to one another, both in our meetings and also on request and informally. There are a number of groups that there's a Vancouver PAC Connections is a Facebook group that is basically Vancouver PAC Executive. I don't know why they still let me in there, but I do occasionally post stuff from DPAC in there, but that is PAC Executive in Vancouver. PACs Helping PACs Lower Mainland. I've seen that group is a little bit more broad. It's across the region, but that's another group of PACs just trying to support PACs. And also we do have a PAC to PAC Slack group that I could mention, that there's a number of parents exec from PACs in that group. I only received an invite to that one myself today, so I'm not sure. I think Krista, you're the admin there. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, or you're still here? No. Okay. And again, just going back to one of the points that I said earlier, DPAC is putting on this educational kind of event just to kind of help PACs, help you build your communities. And you advocate at the school level and at the district level. DPAC advocates at the district level solely, and BCC PAC advocates for parents at the provincial level. So if you have a line item in your budget that says BCC PAC membership, that's you're doing that to help support them. And if you are not a BCC CPAC member, I encourage you to look into it and consider it. One of my very last slides is with regards to fundraising. And as I've said, I know that schools fundraise, and that's something that schools do to bring programs to their children. Fundraising is, frankly, fundraising is something that I also did, but some PACs refuse to fundraise on principle. There are serious equity issues related to fundraising, and the fact that parents need to raise money for some things that are, basically really, really important to our school communities. I think the classic example for me is playgrounds, playgrounds are a big ticket item, and some schools are more able to effectively fundraise for them than others. And frankly, it's such an important part of education at the elementary level. It's a shame that they're not funded properly. We do know that the BC government has started doing grants over the last few years for playgrounds, so it's not a perfect example. But again, the fundraising is something that I know PACs do. There are some inequities associated with it. If you have questions about fundraising, though, or funds, I know that is something that will be covered by our Treasury 101, because he'll talk about how my treasurer will talk about accounting, the accounting you need to do. They'll talk about direct appeals and a number of things related to keeping the books and fundraising. I think I might be at my last slide here. Yes, I am on my last slide. So with that, we're around an hour and a half, hour 40 of me speaking. Does anybody have any questions or any comments from the last little bit, or any general questions they'd like to raise to the group?
Yes, sorry, this is Shervin again from Trafalgar. Just if you don't mind posting, if you get permission, about the Slack group for exec to exec for PACs, that would be awesome.
Sure. And one thing that's great about Zoom meetings, Zoom keeps way too much information about attendees, but everybody registered using an email address that they have access to. So what I'll do is when we're done this meeting, I will circulate. We will be posting at some point we will be posting the recording of this meeting online, but I will also, for all the attendees, I will send you a link to the slide deck, and I will send links to those groups that I just mentioned.
Thank you.
And again, it's just trying to share those things, as widely and broadly as possible, trying to help give information and help connect. Is anybody else? I've been speaking for a while. Maybe it's been interesting. Maybe I've gone off topic. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay. Let me speak to one more thing, maybe two more things. They are a little bit self-promotional in nature, but I do think they're really important. So I've already talked self-promotional in nature for DPAC, not myself personally, but I've already talked about a session for treasurers. That's in 2 weeks' time. It's called Treasury 101. Our treasurer will lead it, and he'll provide information about those things that I just mentioned kind of at the end of the presentation, things like your gaming account, especially your gaming account, but also things like schools that might do direct appeal and some of the accounting things that you need to do to take care of that. So, and I see Alan's thumb is up. His thumbs up. Alan, did you want to say anything more to that?
Sorry. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Gord. Just to invite people to come out. We are anticipating that we'll have maybe about 45 minutes of a presentation time, and then I'd like to, we set the rest of the time up so that people can share information with each other, bring up situations that have been troubling to them that that they've wrestled with successfully that they would like to share with other PACs, or bring up situations they'd like to hear how other PACs have dealt with. So I'm hoping that that'll be a very nuts and boltsy kind of working session for folks. We do have a couple of folks who have stepped up to help be resources, particularly for that part of the evening. I've never actually been a PAC treasurer, so although I've the DPAC treasurer is sort of an analogous kind of job. So yeah, so just hope we get folks turning out and come prepared, come with questions, because there'll be a good set of brains and experience in the room as well.
And so that's that. Thank you, Alan. So that's in 2 weeks' time. That's Thursday, 2 weeks' time. That's Treasury 101. Next, I mentioned earlier in the evening that we, DPAC, have executive meetings and general meetings. And I would tell you that one of the things, and one of our practices in the past has been with many or most of our general meetings, we've had a presentation component. I would say that, we had a discussion about that as an executive, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to make more room for PACs to help set the direction of our advocacy. So we want, and so at next week's general meeting, I will be chairing the meeting. I do not have a vote, okay? And when I say that we are trying to bring more rooms for PACs to help us set the direction, so we have some rules that have been put in our bylaws by a past chair that allow PACs to bring forward motions to be voted on at DPAC general meetings. So I think it's very powerful to have something that we've said, okay, out of 30 or 40 attending schools, 20 school PACs representing 20 schools agreed to this statement. This is the advocacy that you should do to the school district. So again, this is our general meeting next week. I know we have a PAC bringing forward a motion with regards to how the VSB should do school closures, and that I've circulated that by email. I should have circulated that by email to all PAC exec based on the email list that I have. I really encourage you to think about it. Look at the motion, discuss it among your PACs, and send your rep or your chair to our meeting next week, ready to engage and again, talk about it. I think it's very important to the future of. I think advocacy is important, and it's important to hear from schools, and that's really why we are trying to make more room for it to happen at our general meetings. And that's all. And that's all I really had. I'll stay for. And thank you very much for attending. I know I talked a lot, and I promise to share slides and at some point the video. And I will follow up with links to those groups. With that, I'm going to stop recording the presentation. If I'm going to stay around for a bit, so if anybody has any questions for me, or if they just want to chat, I'll stay around for a little bit. But with that, thank you very much for your time. Have a great year with your PACs. It's still a challenging year, and the jobs that you're doing are really important to your parents. Thank you for being there and stepping up. And Shervin?
Hi, I can wait to see if other people need a turn first, but if they don't, I have a couple of questions, please.
Go for it. I'd say I don't see any other hands up, and yeah, go for it.
Oh, Nina has a question.
Okay, Nina.
Oh, you can go ahead. I just have a quick question about the motions, because we have a pretty new PAC, so I'm not quite sure if the email address got updated where you would send the motion. Can I find that motion for next week online on your website, or where would I find it?
One moment, please. I will put. Okay, sorry. You're saying that if I communicated by email, it might have gotten lost.
Yeah, because we have a brand new PAC, so we have a brand new chair, brand new treasurer, everything like that. So, and I don't know how well, and I'm new to the school, so I don't know how well the communication is. But we have a PAC meeting just next week, Tuesday, just before the general meetings. I would love to bring it up, but I would like to be able to actually present the motion, and I'm not sure if they received it. So is there any way where I can find it?
I have to say that right now I can only, like, there's no link on the front page of our website, but it is on our Twitter. It would be one of the things that's probably linked right at the top of our Twitter, saying I have, the next 3 weeks. I mentioned this meeting, I mentioned the meeting next week, and I mentioned the treasurer meeting. Our Twitter account is Van DPAC, and I will. Just bear with me if you bear with me one moment, I will share the link in the chat I will share the link to Facebook, actually, because it was way easier to read in Facebook. Just one moment, please.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Just bear with me.
I just want to chime in and say thank you very much, Gord. That was super informative. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. I just doing my job, trying to help. I'm so excited to be giving. I really get it. I stumble over my words a little bit, but I really am excited to be giving this presentation, because it's everybody here is a volunteer, right? I mean, we're here because we're trying to do better for our kids. Okay, and so in the chat, I'm going to stop the screen share just one moment, and I'm going to stop the recording.